The grand auditorium at the University of Cincinnati was a cauldron of restless energy. Over 1,000 bodies crammed into the space. Students sprawled across seats, faculty perched stiffly in the upper rows, and spectators lining the walls like sentinels. The air buzzed with whispers and the faint hum of anticipation, punctuated by the occasional creak of a chair or the rustle of a notebook. Overhead, spotlights sliced through the dimness, bathing the stage in a stark, unforgiving glow. Cameras from CNN, Fox, and a dozen smaller outlets flanked the room, their lenses glinting like predators sizing up prey. This wasn't just a debate. It was a showdown. At the podium stood Emily Harper, a veteran journalist with a voice as crisp as autumn leaves. Her gray suit was impeccable, her expression a mask of neutrality. She tapped the microphone, and the crowd hushed instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her words slicing through the tension. "Tonight, we host a debate that promises to ignite passions and challenge convictions. Our topic, free speech in the university setting. On my left, Karoline Leavitt, former government spokesperson and conservative commentator. On my right, Professor Richard Lawson, a distinguished academic with a career spanning decades and a voice for progressive ideals. Let the battle begin." The crowd erupted, half cheers, half murmurs, as Karoline and Lawson took their places. Karoline, mid-30s, stood with the poise of a seasoned warrior. Blonde hair swept back, eyes sharp as a hawk's, her navy blazer crisp against the stage lights. Lawson, nearing 60, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses with a deliberate slowness, his tweed jacket and graying beard lending him an air of scholarly authority. But beneath the surface, the stakes were palpable. This wasn't about ideas alone. It was personal. Lawson went first. He stepped to the microphone, a faint smirk curling his lips as he surveyed the sea of faces. Then he turned his gaze on Karoline, and the smirk widened. "Well, isn't this a treat?" he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Karoline Leavitt, here to enlighten us all on free speech. A woman who cut her teeth spinning tales for the Trump administration. Tell me, Ms. Leavitt, do you actually believe in free speech? Or is this just another performance from a political puppet?" A ripple of reactions swept the room. Some students burst into laughter, their chuckles sharp and mocking. Others gasped, hands flying to mouths in shock. A group of fraternity brothers in the back hooped, while a cluster of graduate students scribbled furiously in their notebooks. The cameras zoomed in on Karoline, capturing every flicker of her expression. But she didn't flinch. Her lips parted in a faint, almost amused smile, and her eyes locked onto Lawson's like a missile finding its target. Emily Harper raised a hand. "Ms. Leavitt, your response?" Karoline stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood stage. She tilted her head slightly, the smile sharpening into something lethal. "That's a fascinating opener, Professor," she said, her voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. "Especially coming from a man who's spent his career in the ivory tower. Tell me, shouldn't a university professor be the guardian of diverse thought? Or do you think free speech only applies to those who nod along to your progressive gospel?" The crowd erupted. A wave of applause rolled from the right side of the hall, where students in red hats and polo shirts pumped their fists. But the left side bristled, hisses and boos clashing with the cheers. Lawson shifted his weight, his smirk faltering for a split second. The cameras caught it. A twitch of the jaw, a flicker of unease. Karoline didn't pause. "Let's talk reality," she pressed, her voice rising with a quiet fury. "How many conservative students in this room, in your classrooms, feel free to speak their minds? How many have been shamed into silence by professors who'd rather preach than teach? You call me a puppet, but who's pulling the strings here, Professor? Who's choking the life out of academic freedom?" The hall split like a fault line. Applause thundered from one half, while jeers and shouts, "That's not true! She's lying!" burst from the other. A young woman in a hijab stood up, shaking her head, only to be drowned out by a roar of approval from a group of athletes near the front. Lawson's face tightened, his fingers curling around the edge of the podium. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but Karoline wasn't done. "Ask yourself this," she said, turning to the audience now, her voice a whip crack. "When was the last time you heard a dissenting voice in one of his lectures? When was the last time you felt safe to disagree?" She paused, letting the questions hang like smoke. "Or is dissent only welcome when it fits the script?" The applause was deafening now, a tidal wave crashing over the room. Lawson's eyes narrowed, his knuckles whitening on the podium. Emily Harper stepped in, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Professor Lawson, your rebuttal." Lawson adjusted his glasses, a bead of sweat glistening on his temple. He leaned into the microphone, his voice louder now, tinged with a defensive edge. "This is absurd," he snapped. "Ms. Leavitt wants to play the victim card, paint herself as some martyr for free speech. But let's be honest, people like her aren't defending liberty. They're manipulating it. They want to drag outdated, divisive ideas into our classrooms and call it freedom. It's a sham." The words landed like a misfired grenade. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by a low rumble of discontent. Students exchanged glances, some confused, others incredulous. A girl with purple hair in the third row whispered, "Did he just say that?" A guy in a hoodie beside her shook his head, muttering, "Weak." The cameras swiveled, capturing the shift. Karoline didn't hesitate. She stepped closer to her microphone, her voice ringing out clear and cold. "So, let me get this straight, Professor. Defending free speech, the right to speak, to think, to disagree is outdated now. That's your stance." She turned to the audience, her eyes blazing. "He just said it, folks. Freedom's a sham unless it's his version of freedom. Who's the puppet now?" The hall exploded. Cheers and claps surged from one side, while boos and shouts of shame erupted from the other. A student in a tie-dye shirt stood up, yelling, "You're twisting his words," only to be drowned out by a chant from the back, "Free speech! Free speech!" Lawson's face flushed red, his hands trembling as he gripped the podium. He opened his mouth to respond, but Karoline cut in again, her voice a dagger. "Maybe the students here can decide for themselves," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "Who's fighting for an open campus? You with your lectures on approved ideas, or me, calling out the censorship you pretend doesn't exist?" She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "Who's really afraid of the truth?" The applause was a thunderclap, shaking the walls. Lawson stammered, "That's not. I didn't." But his words were lost in the roar. Students were on their feet now, some clapping, others shaking their heads in disgust. A boy in a baseball cap turned to his friend, grinning. "She just buried him." The cameras zoomed in on Lawson's sweat-slicked face, then panned to Karoline's triumphant stare. The tide had turned. The debate ended at 9:47 p.m., but the real fireworks were just beginning. By 10:15, the first clips hit X, TikTok, and YouTube, sliced into bite-sized bombshells by eager hands. The titles screamed for attention. "Professor crumbles under Leavitt's attack." 1.2 million views in an hour. "Karoline Leavitt drops truth bombs on woke hypocrisy." Shared 47,000 times. "Lawson calls free speech outdated. Students revolt." Trending #1 by midnight. The comments sections were a war zone. "She ate him alive," crowed one user. "Lawson's a disgrace to academia," wrote another. But the other side fired back. "Leavitt's a grifter. Pure propaganda. This is why campuses are toxic." Hashtags like #Leavitt wins and #Lawson loses battle for dominance. While memes, Karoline smirking, Lawson sweating, flooded Instagram reels. The news networks pounced. Fox ran a glowing segment titled, "Conservative Star School's Progressive Prof," with pundits hailing Karoline as a voice of reason. CNN countered with Lawson's stand against hate speech misunderstood, accusing her of grandstanding. Online, the game was on. Every quip, every stumble dissected and weaponized. A 15-second clip of Karoline's "Who's Afraid of the Truth" line racked up 3 million views. Captioned, "The mic drop heard round the world." Back at Cincinnati, the fallout hit hard. By morning, a petition circulated among students, demanding Lawson's resignation. He stifled debate for years. It read, "Time's up." It gained 2,000 signatures in 24 hours. A rival petition, "Defend Lawson against right-wing smears," sprang up hours later, splitting the campus into warring camps. Protests brewed outside the admin building, chants of "free speech now," clashing with "no hate here." Before the debate, Karoline had paced a quiet green room, her phone buzzing with texts from allies. "Crush him," one read. She'd stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, whispering, "This is bigger than me." Now, as she strode out of the auditorium, her phone lit up again. Congratulations, interview requests, threats. She ignored them all, her mind replaying Lawson's faltering face. He didn't see it coming, she thought. Neither did they. Lawson, meanwhile, slumped in his office 2 floors above the hall. Papers littered his desk, notes he'd never used, arguments he'd never made. His phone buzzed too, but he didn't look. A colleague, Dr. Saring Gwynn, had warned him, "She's a shark, Richard. Don't underestimate her." He'd laughed it off. Now, staring at the petition on his laptop, he felt the weight of his misstep. Outdated? He thought. Did I really say that? Karoline stepped into the cool night air, the cheers still echoing in her ears. Her breath fogged in the October chill, but her smile was warm. Not smug, but resolute. She'd lit a spark, and the blaze was spreading. Across campus, students huddled in dorms, debating her words. Online, the clips multiplied, each view a ripple in a growing wave. Free speech wasn't just a topic now, it was a fight, and she'd claimed the first victory. Inside, Lawson gathered his things, his movements slow and heavy. The hall was empty, the cameras gone, but the silence screamed louder than the crowd. He glanced at a framed photo on his desk, him decades younger, lecturing a rapt class. Where did I lose them? He wondered. The answer stung. Tonight. As Karoline disappeared into the night and Lawson locked his office door, the University of Cincinnati stood at a crossroads. The debate was over, but the war had just begun.